Hello, I'm Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff, and welcome to another episode of the RSO Roundup. We have a very serious topic to talk about today. You know, the Roundup is where we talk about, we highlight people from the department. We talk about maybe bureaus or things that we do. Today's going to be a little bit different. We've had a lot of requests for information about fentanyl. So we are going to do that today. I am lucky to have Master Investigator Jim Peters with us today, and he is our resident expert, one of our resident experts in the department on fentanyl, and we are going to talk about the dangers. It might be a little fragmented. I'm sure about 8 million times in this episode, we're going to tell you the dangers of fentanyl and how you need to avoid it at all costs and help your kids avoid it at all costs. But we're going to give you a little background on it, where it came from, where it's coming from, how it's getting here, the prevalence of it, of what's happening right now, and just the disaster that it's causing within our community. So, Jim, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, sir.
So to start with, we always do this. Tell me a little bit about yourself. We always like to highlight the employee, your time with the department, what you've done, and how you got to where you are right now.
Absolutely, sir. Got hired in 1999, did my patrol time at Paris Station, was there for 6 years, and then promoted to investigator in 2006. And I've been at the rank of investigator for coming up on 16 years.
We have different ranks of investigator. Within our rank of investigator, we have different levels.
We do. The title sounds a little gaudy, but I am a master investigator. What that basically means is I put in the time, I've taken the classes, presented major case, worked big assignments, things like that, and had the opportunity to test for it and was promoted to master investigator. But I think it's basically just been around long enough to see a lot of stuff. It's not
that's humble, but I mean it's a process to get to where you are, and it's a deserving title and a deserving thing that you have done. You certainly had to earn it, and you're one of a few in the department that have reached that master investigator level. So it is a big deal. You've had different assignments within investigations that kind of lend a little bit of expertise into what we're talking about today and why.
Absolutely. So when we get around to talking about fentanyl and the fact that we're charging these crimes as murder, the fact that I worked 8 years in the Central Homicide Unit is what gave me the ability to look at these cases a little different than anyone else. I also did a year at Moreno Valley and 6 years at Harupa Station. And then last year, when fentanyl really was hitting the news, we had a great leader who suggested, why don't we start a team that's going to deal with this kind of stuff? We're getting press requests all the time. We're having school districts asking us for information. How do we educate parents? How do we educate the kids?
Right.
And nobody was in that position.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on that and how that came about is 2019, December of 2019, there was a young girl died in Temecula.
Ali Capeludo.
And she, beautiful young girl, life ahead of her, a good girl, straight A student.
She was a student at my alma mater, ASU.
Yes, she came home for Christmas, and she was having some sleep issues. She, right or wrong, she obtained a pill to help her sleep through anxiety or sleep issues, whatever it was. And unfortunately, what she got was not what she thought she had. It was a fentanyl pill where she thought she was getting something else. And that pill was made to look like that, but it contained nothing but fentanyl. And she died that night. And so her parents came and met me, and it was several months later, and they had an issue with the overdose. And there's a stigma with fentanyl that people are overdosing. And the stigma with an overdose is you think of that and you think, well, they deserved it, or they were taking their life into their own hands. They knew they shouldn't have been using those drugs, and they took too much and they died. And the reality is that's not really what it is, because you think of a heroin overdose, you get someone that's using heroin all the time, and eventually they took too much and it killed them. Well, with fentanyl, these people are thinking that they're taking a pill that's relatively harmless. It could be a Vicodin pill. We take Vicodin all the time. We're prescribed Vicodin all the time. It could be a Xanax. It could be a Percocet. It could be any of those pills where one of those pills is not going to harm you. You may not should be taking it, but it certainly is not going to harm you. But when you have a pill that was manufactured out of fentanyl to look like one of those other legitimate pills, that's when we're having all of these deaths.
Absolutely.
And we had a handful, I think it was like 8 or 9 in the first part of 2020, all of high school kids.
Yeah.
And then in our patrol stations, we started seeing all of these overdoses that we were calling overdoses, where we're responding out to kids that were unconscious and young adults that were unconscious. And it led us to we realized what it was. We realized it was fentanyl, and it was basically new onto the scene. And we had to outfit our entire department with Narcan.
Yep.
So Narcan is an antidote basically to, I don't think that's the right word, but it counteracts
An
the
opioid
narcotic,
overdose. Yeah.
yes, and it revives you. So all of our deputies have that, and even though we have had hundreds per year, I think we're up close to 500. I don't know the exact numbers this past year, but it's probably in the thousands and maybe even several thousands, approaching 10,000s.
Absolutely. In Riverside County, not just the fatal, but the non-fatal, the people we will go interview. Yeah, we're last year easily over 3,600.
Yeah. It's crazy. The amount of this drug that's on our streets and that our kids are getting, even that our adults are getting, is crazy. And the thing with fentanyl is it's been described a lot. I actually saw a news report this morning, and the way they described it was a penny. And if you look at one of the numbers on the date of a penny, that is the size of the amount of fentanyl that is a fatal dose.
Yeah, and that's what causes fentanyl to be its own problem. When you were talking about heroin or the other things earlier, they don't have that same potency.
Yeah.
Fentanyl in such a small amount can be fatal. And when we're talking to people, that everybody has their own story about why they chose this as their way of self-medicating or this as their vice. They're from different races, different socioeconomic groups. They're old, they're young. Doesn't matter if you dropped out of school in second grade or you have multiple doctorates. It all comes down to addiction. And this is not just more deadly at lower levels, but so much more addictive than anything we've seen before.
Yes, absolutely. And so just a little bit of history of fentanyl and what it is. It's a synthetic opiate.
Yes, sir. And the way it's normally prescribed, and having a brother who's a doctor and other friends who are doctors, I asked them this specifically. Why do you guys even have this? Why is this even available if this is a deadly thing? Well, it has tremendous appropriate purpose in the medical field, but it's delivered either in a hospital where they're constantly monitoring you, or it's given in doses of micrograms,
yes.
1/10,000th of a gram, something you couldn't see. And they'll either provide it in a spray or a dermal patch, those kinds of things. The people who need it, they absolutely need it. And there's nothing else that is as good at stopping severe pain, cancer
in
patients.
The surgery.
Absolutely.
Right. A little personal use with it. My son broke his arm, multiple compound fracture of his arm while he was skiing. And I knew this was going on. It was at the beginning of the fentanyl stage. And so while we're in the hospital, I heard that they were giving him fentanyl, but it was 60 micrograms.
Yeah.
And they were saying how high that was, trying to get rid of his pain. And the amount that it takes, I mean, that's fine. Their doctors are right there with you. The anesthesiologist keeping you alive. Yeah. When you're out in your bedroom or you're out at a party, you don't have that luxury.
No. And you were talking about it earlier. We've become a pill society, right? There is nobody's home that doesn't have at least ibuprofen and Tylenol and old antibiotics or vitamin pills or whatever. It's become second nature that if something doesn't feel right, well, there's a pill for that. All kinds of over-the-counter things. And so this is the next evolution of that. But these pills are not, fentanyl is not prescribed in a pill form for a legitimate purpose anywhere.
Right.
So if you're taking a pill and you don't know where it came from, that's when people are taking their life in their hands, that the tiniest little bit, a fraction, you could break off a pill and the crumb, you almost couldn't see it, and that could be a fatal dose.
Correct. And so like a grain of salt, it could be a fatal dose.
Very much so.
And certainly 2 of those would be. So fentanyl comes in a powdered form, but what we are finding is we're not only are we finding in the powdered form, but it's being smuggled across our southern border in droves. I mean, the amount of seizures that we had from in 2020 compared to 2019 and 2021 compared to 2020 is astronomical.
Yeah.
Astronomical. And even this year, so far this year, from what I was told of January, we're at a third of what we had all last year.
Yeah. So where there's a demand, there is always going to be a supply.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that supply is being met. And like you're talking about, it's coming into the country in inappropriate ways. And once it gets here, the people who are putting it together and pressing it into pills, you can buy a secondhand pill press from a legit pharmaceutical company that just doesn't need it anymore for a few $1,000s. You can buy powdered fentanyl that's smuggled in, a kilogram for somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000. You start milling your own pills, and the amount of money that for a $15,000 investment, they could be making $1 million worth of pills. And so it is taken off.
One of the things that you mentioned is the price. So roughly $3,000 to $5,000 for a kilo of fentanyl is very similar to a kilo of cocaine, a kilo of heroin. You know, within they're not astronomical amounts. The difference is that kilo of fentanyl is 1,000 times.
Maybe even more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's not even close. The cost per dose is so minuscule that these drug dealers are using it for their own benefit.
Yeah, the profit margin is huge, and that, you know, you start asking people, because when you think of the old, when I say old, the late 90s and early 2000s, when I started, the idea was money. That's what they were after. So it's not a good business model for your customers to die, but when they're making 2,000% profit on every pill,
yes,
they kind of don't care anymore. And so
we're also this is for everyone out there. You think, well, this is not going to affect me. I mean, depending on who you are, you could be saying that, my drug of choice is methamphetamine. My drug of choice is heroin. My drug of choice is cocaine, marijuana. It doesn't matter what your drug of choice is. It could be pills. You could be addicted to oxys. You could be addicted to Vicodin. You could be addicted to Valium. All of those pills are being made out of fentanyl to look like those pills.
Absolutely.
And they're at a fraction of the cost, fractions of a cent per pill rather than dollars, and they're selling them for dollars. And then even the illicit drugs, the cocaine's, the methamphetamine, even though they're a different, methamphetamine obviously is a serious stimulant, we're finding that we're finding fentanyl in it now.
Yes, we are.
Because the drug dealers are finding a way to make you as the drug user want to go back to that
more addictive
drug.
It is
certainly more addictive. You get a different type of a high, so you keep going back to that drug dealer. And we're unfortunately getting people that are using meth a lot, and all of a sudden they're ODing on fentanyl.
Yeah.
And it's something serious that we really need to start educating everyone about. It's a soft spot for me is our kids, because I know that kids will be kids and they do silly things, and
they don't realize it's every teenager's job to do everything they can to ruin their future and kill themselves without realizing they're ruining their future and trying to kill themselves. And the idea I've never liked the idea, but it was commonplace in the 90s and early 2000s that when you go to college or when you're graduated from high school, you experiment and those kinds of things.
They call it the college experience.
And
You've
there's
got to
no
get the
room
college
for that
experience
anymore, because that one dose,
right?
When the DEA tests the stuff that we seize, they're saying anywhere between 10% and 40% of what we seize. So 2 out of every 5 pills has a lethal dose in it. This is beyond the statistics for even Russian roulette. There's
now,
no experimentation.
this'll. I mean, I hope people have heard this because I've heard it multiple times, depending on what you watch on TV. But the number one cause of death right now in the U.S. is fentanyl. It's not cancer. It's not heart attack. It's not COVID. It is fentanyl.
And we're talking about the money age group, the 18 to 49-year-olds. We're not talking about
the 65, 75, 85-year-olds.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah, it's a serious epidemic. It's a serious crisis that we're involved in, and it's being compounded. I mean, we can't get around the politic part of it. It's being compounded because of the ease of it coming across the border. Yeah. Fentanyl comes from China. It is made in China. It's smuggled through our southern border. And then now we have to deal with it. I know there was a couple of weeks ago, it may have been a month or so ago, there was a local seizure of fentanyl powder that was enough of a fatal dose to wipe out the United States.
Yeah, the district attorney's office put together a graphic to explain to the judge why they wanted to charge it differently and ask for different bail amounts. And they showed, okay, let's take the first 2 nuclear bombs that were dropped in World War II. This small area of Southern California, this is how many people would have died. Now, what's sitting over there in that case, and the graphic covered many states.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. But the judges, parents, everybody, it's new. I don't think we're at the beginning of the fentanyl crisis. I think we're hitting a peak, but it's new to us because it's new in the press. It's new. Your neighbor died of what? Fentanyl? I've never even heard of that. We're getting a lot of that and having to educate even the people in politics, and even our governments are terribly slow to change.
Absolutely.
And so this has to be an organization-wide change, and it has been for us, and we're still working on it, but for every government agency, not just in California, but the U.S. And some of them have differing ideas on how to stop it.
Absolutely. So here locally, I spoke about the 2019 death of Alex, and her father and mother came and met with me and told me what happened to them and how we investigated it and the difference between the overdose and the poisoning. And this really is a fatal poisoning. She thought she was buying something, one little pill, and it was something else. And I met with, the parents did also. They met with our district attorney, Mike Hestron. Mm-hmm. I knew that meeting had happened. So I got with Mike and we talked about what we were going to have to do. We're going to have to do something. There were too many high school kids that were going out with this, and a lot of them were dying. And I ended up saying that we need some type of a task force for this. We need some type of a group that is concentrating on just this. So we formed it, and luckily Mike was on board, and we got with the district attorney that had the same passion as the investigators on the team, that same passion of how we were going to make it work, because there really wasn't. It was something new. We were cutting edge of how we were going to combat this, and we ended up. Your team ended up arresting someone for murder.
Yeah, we're at 11 state filings against 12 people charged with 187 of the Penal Code, murder. And the case you're talking about with the Capiloutos, a case was filed early this year through federal court. Right. So that's 12 cases. And when you're talking about getting together with the district attorney's office, it's not just them. It's also our toxicology group, the private lab that we use. It's what happens with our coroner's bureau. And then it starts with the line deputies and them understanding, number one, it's dangerous. Number two, this is what you need to be looking for. Number three, we have to do a better job on the front end on these cases because they're not traditional murders. It's not husband kills wife, boyfriend kills girlfriend, grandkids kill grandma. It's not those usual motivators. This is very often somebody you don't know. There's anonymity to it. You can buy it through the internet.
Yes.
So we might not find out for weeks, hey, this person died of a fentanyl overdose. And so we're weeks behind. If we didn't have the help of the district attorney's office, our coroner's bureau, and our toxicology group, we would be stuck. We get requests from other agencies all the time. How are you making this work? And that's our number one answer is it has to be a collaborative. It can't just be you.
Yeah.
If your sheriff's department wants to do it, great. Good luck. because the people who then take it to court, if the district attorney is not on board, it's not going to work.
Right. So we set a precedence, and we started making these arrests. We started going through the preliminary hearings, and it was working. And we I don't want to say we showed them. I guess we led the way for other agencies in the state to start doing this, and they modeled what we were doing and what our DA's office was doing. And so there has been a couple others in the state that have been filed, but we certainly are leading the way with the 11. Well, one federal, but
yeah. And the team was formed the last week of March 2021. So we're 10 months old. Started with one sergeant and one investigator. We're now one sergeant, 4 investigators, but we're supplemented by all of our narcotics investigators. Again, these are not traditional types of murders. So we're not looking at a crime scene the same way. We're not looking for, again, those usual motivators. It's narcotics based.
Right.
So we use a lot of narcotics investigation. I'm unusual I'm not good at surveillance. They ask me all the time, hey, will you come help with the surveillance? I'm not going to fit in. But the people we work with and the teams we're supplemented by do, and they know their stuff. And so surveillances and things going on with computers and phones and all that great stuff, again, it's a collaboration. We will do our portion, but we need help with that narcotics expertise.
Right. And speaking of the help, we need help of the public. We need this. We're not the cutting edge. We're at the beginning edges of trying to get this information out. I know Mike Hester and I have done a press conference. We've done several press releases about the dangers of fentanyl and what it is. But we need people to start talking about this. We need the schools to start talking about it. We need parents to start talking about it. One of the downfalls of the dangers of something good, out of something good is always something bad. And so we've got technology in our hands with our cell phones. We're all walking around with computers. And these kids or these adults, and for you parents out there, your kids are ordering these pills through Snapchat and through Instagram.
Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp. We are constantly having to deal with these companies. Your kids can buy it through Apple Pay. They'll have a high school or an underage checking account through B of A. They'll hook it up to their Apple Pay. It's all on the phone. You have no idea. It'll come in the mail.
Yeah.
So
it's a serious problem.
And it's a hard thing to have to deal with if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah. We've come across, I was talking earlier about these college kids and younger kids who think they're just out having a good time, whether it's, drinking a beer or alcohol, or they're going to take a pill. I know several years ago they were talking about pill parties where everybody brought pills and you dump them in a bowl and you just take whatever you wanted. And there's still going on, but lurking in that bowl of legitimate pills are now nothing but fentanyl.
Yeah.
And that's when you take that one pill and
again,
you're done.
We're talking bad statistics. We're not talking 1 in 100. We're talking 1 in 10. Or more than 1 in 5 chance with every pill you take.
Right, 2 out of 5.
Yeah. The addictive level, I've had the opportunity to actually watch somebody use the Narcan. It was in our Harupa Valley station, and it took 2 doses of Narcan to bring back this 19-year-old girl. And the paramedics arrived. They put her in the ambulance, and because I'm there, I'm going to start talking to her. Hey, tell me where you got your fentanyl. Oh, I bought it over by the mall. Okay, well, who did you sell? Who did you buy it from? I'm not going to tell you. Mm-hmm. Why aren't you going to tell me? Because in 12 hours, when I get out of the hospital, I need to go buy some more. And I'm looking her in the eyes and saying, you were dead 5 minutes ago, but for modern science, you were dead. Yeah, I know, but the addictive hold it has on young people, mm-hmm. How do we combat that?
Yeah. Parents really need to be aware of it. Really need to be aware because it's so easy to get. It's so silent to get. You don't know that your kids are taking pills. I mean, if they're smoking marijuana, you can smell it on them. You can see the symptoms of it. But if they're taking a pill to sleep at night, or if they're taking, for anxiety or for depression or whatever it is that they think they're taking it for, they never know when they're going to get that fentanyl pill instead of what they wanted, and that's all. That's all it takes.
Yeah. The self-medicating is its own whole different issue. I had the opportunity to go talk at a couple of Corona Norco Unified School District did parent meetings, and they offered extra credit to the high school kids to get them to come, but they were there and they were listening, but all the same questions. My kid doesn't do that. I agree. I've got 4 kids. They don't do that, right? Wink, wink, nod, nod. Everybody's human. And when we're talking about addiction and at a level we've never seen before, we still don't understand it. We have to be in our kids' business.
Right. So I relate this to drug seizures, and you talk about seizing cocaine and methamphetamine and heroin, but we know the levels that are still on the street. The amount of fentanyl that we are seizing is astronomical.
Yeah.
And we know that that's only a percentage of what gets out to the street. So the amount of fentanyl that is in our society today that is being peddled by drug dealers is astronomical.
Yep.
And it could be you tomorrow. It could be your kids tomorrow. It could be your parents tomorrow. I guess the takeaway is, if it didn't come from your doctor with your name on it, don't take that pill, because you never know what it really contains. What we are doing is taking the typical drug overdose where it was an accidental overdose, you took too much, and we have turned that into a homicide because someone is knowingly selling fentanyl and the dangers, and that it could kill them, and then it's killing them. So they knowingly did this process that caused the death of another person.
So it's a different legal idea. And of course, we had to bring the district attorney's office in with us. They had to agree, or this would never work. We protect free speech, but everybody understands you can't be in a crowded theater and start yelling fire, or somebody's got a gun, because the panic it's going to cause, and it's going to hurt people. This is the same deal. This is so much more lethal. This is so much more addictive. This is so much more of a problem, but you're concerned about your profit margin. You're concerned about making money more than, well, I might be killing 2 out of every 5 people I sell this to. That kind of depravity,
So I'm gonna take this on a different turn, and because I do this once in a while, and I'm going to take it away from where it is and put it on, some of the problem that causes us, which is our legislature. And so, in addition to having to let people know of this danger, I have to let them know that our legislator is not helping us. Our legislators we are attempting to get laws passed to be able to punish these people that are selling these drugs that are killing us, and our legislature refuses.
No, they're more interested in what's going to get them political points, and regardless of what your politics are, right, left, center, doesn't matter. Your neighbors are dying, so that needs to be important.
Right. And they don't. It's one of those things where unless it happens to one of them, I don't think they're going to care.
Yeah.
So for the people listening, you have to start seriously speaking out to our assembly people and our people in state government, and get on them to fix this. Get on them to give us the tools to be able to find and stop and prevent these deaths, because right now they're making it easier, and we're trying to get laws passed that they are just flat out blocking, because they're more concerned about someone going to prison than about 15 people dying.
Yeah. The idea of criminal rights is important, but it gets the victims' rights get lost in that political discussion. I never get to meet people on the best day of their life. It's always a horrible day. They've lost a loved one. The worst thing ever has happened to them. And one family I talked with recently had the opportunity to testify in front of the state Senate. And they were given 3 minutes, and they were trying to talk about their family's story, their personal impact. Those of you sitting on the receiving end of this, my state legislators, you don't know. You haven't been through it. And God forbid, I don't want you to have to go through it, but let me tell you what happened to me. And they were cut off before their 3 minutes were up. And the chairman said, we are not going to do anything that puts more people in jail. Mm-hmm. And they almost didn't have a response to that okay, got it. But what about all of these people who are dying? where do we draw the line? Where do we stop this?
Yeah, and it's something that this is going to have to be a bigger conversation and a more often conversation because we have our hands full right now. I mean, you're busy. The amount of cases that you have and that your team has is far more than what our normal investigative caseload is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm having to pull from other places. I'm having to try and beef you guys up because of the workload that you have. And this is all over. It's not unique to us. And it's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about more and more and more till people really understand it and see that this isn't a drug culture underworld thing anymore. This could happen to you tomorrow. I will say that I've taken a pain pill before that was prescribed to my wife for something else, and I've taken it before. And we all have. We've all taken Motrin that was not supposed to be for you. And you think it's just an innocent little thing that's not going to hurt you. But with fentanyl and with the amount of fentanyl out there, that one time could be it.
Yeah.
And you're not coming back from it.
You were saying earlier there's a stigma to it, and there is, and that's part of what we're having to fight, not just in our own organization or within the government, but with everyone we talk to. The idea of overdose it's a bad word. We think of, junkies with tattoos all over their arms and people who live in the squalor,
homeless people in the street.
And that is not what this is. If you look at these statistics, we get weekly updates from the coroner's office, and it's this person was 19, this person was 23, this person was in graduate school, this person had just been accepted to Harvard. It's not a stereotype. So
being the coroner, I get updates every day of the deaths that the Coroner's Bureau investigated. And for those out there listening to how serious this is, in probably maybe the last 7-8 months, there's only been 3 days that someone hasn't died from fentanyl.
Yeah.
There's only been 3 days. And normally it's multiple. The most we had was 9 in one day. But it's usually 2 to 4, 2 to 6, somewhere in that range. Every single day.
Yeah. If that was a gang murder and we were having 2 or 3 or 6 murders a day, everybody in the world would be screaming.
Yeah. I mean, and I do this to myself, but I don't want to downplay COVID, but this is far more dangerous and serious than COVID. And we are bombarded every single day, morning and night on the news about COVID.
And we get more money for COVID. Everybody's interested in let's pay people to stay at home, or let's buy masks, or let's do all of this stuff. And you're exactly right. The most important thing they could be doing right now is focusing on a multi-tiered approach, not just our enforcement. That's our job. That's our part. That's our corner of the store. But the prevention, the treatment, the actual look at what's causing this addiction, you're getting down to the base level of what's going on and putting the money there. I don't need any more masks.
Yeah. Yeah. A mask isn't going to stop you from overdosing on fentanyl.
And again, it has to be a multi-tiered approach. Absolutely. It's going to require change. It's going to require money, but we're ramping up for a political, this is a election cycle.
Absolutely.
Let's make phone calls. This is
Find out what your legislator or potential legislator lawmaker believes about fentanyl and about the people that are peddling and smuggling and selling fentanyl before you vote for them. I said
from
it. You
your
don't
lips
have
to God's ears.
Absolutely. So for all of our listeners out there, I hope this was interesting. I'm looking at the time, and this is far more than we've ever spent. But I have a feeling we're going to have to come back and touch on this again, because we'll be more specific. We'll draw down on some of the questions that people are asking. We'll probably have to do this a lot more often. There's a lot more to talk about. I'm going through my head thinking, over this last half hour, there were a lot of things I could have said, but we were talking about other things that were just as important. So I appreciate you coming on here today.
My pleasure, sir.
And whether you like it or not, I'm probably going to have you back, and we'll address some of the questions and delve into this a little bit more, because it's certainly one of the most serious things that we're dealing with right now in Riverside County. So we're going to have to do our best to get the word out there to all of our residents to be on the lookout for it and be careful with it. And really, I guess the only real way to is just don't do it.
Yeah.
So very
Looking
good.
forward to it, sir.
Jim,
Thank
thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the RSO Roundup.